So next, we have a panel of a number of industry and brand experts, brand representatives. I actually won't introduce them myself because there's a number of them, and I want them to be able to speak to their own roles at their brands. But we are going to spend a number of time talking about why tech design belongs at the heart of your DPC strategy. And it's something that is actually very close to my heart as well. One of the things I've always noticed is that tech design, pattern making, that skill, often brands seem to think that that's something that can be outsourced. And I think a brand's fit is critical to their consumer engagement and critical to consumer trust. And that normally sits within tech design. So it's an absolutely critical role. As I used to maintain, it was the triad. So design, merchandising, and technical design are your triad for success in terms of being able to produce high quality products. So with that, I will let them come on board here. Kerrie, Meghan, good to see you.
Good Hello. To see you. Thank you for that introduction.
Yeah. Andrea?
Good morning. Well, it's morning here. I know it's a different time for everybody everywhere, but yes, welcome. Hi, my name's Andrea Strom, and I'm glad to have you here. Thank you, audience, for joining us today on day 2 of the 3D Fest. And to this session, as Joshua just said, where we're discussing why technical design should be at the heart of the digital creation process. And Joshua, I couldn't agree with you more. There is a real kind of intimacy between technical design and the product that they work on. It's not easily transferable. You do have to get kind of immersed in what you're doing to truly understand it and bring it forth as best as you possibly can for that brand and that customer. So thank you for having that discussion and bringing that up. So just a little introduction for myself real quickly. Again, my name's Andrea Strom. I've spent nearly 4 decades in the apparel development industry. And the first half of that I spent as a custom clothier with a sewing service. And the second half of that with the Nordstrom product group as technical designer and as a manager. And I spanned all different customer size ranges, product categories. I've dabbled in all of it and enjoyed learning along the way from all the experts in the field that I worked with. Our panelists today are all technical design experts and professionals and experts in 3D. And they're here today to share some of their experiences and perspectives on how to implement digital product creation, navigate the organizational change, and use institutional knowledge in 3D as an empowerment tool for technical designers. So I'd like to introduce you to Afsha, I hope I get this right, Iragorri, Meghan, Laino, Kerrie, Rogers, Engle. Afsha, would you please tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you, Andrea. So hi, everyone. My name's Afsha Iragorri. I'm the co-founder and head of 3D tech design at 3D Fashion Solutions. We're a service company that helps apparel brands with digital product creation. We work with all sorts of clients, some of which are direct to consumer, and some of which are vendors that sell to companies like Walmart or Target. I've worked in the fashion industry for roughly 7 years now, specifically on tech design teams for companies such as Coldwater Creek in Boston, Ralph Lauren in New York, and actually I worked on the same 3D team with Meghan at Calvin Klein before starting my own company in 2021. So I work with Browswear, also helping create 3D marketing content and helping support their indie community. So all in all, I've been in the 3D space for about 6 years now.
Great, thank you for that. Meghan, would you tell us about yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm Meghan Laino. I'm the 3D tech lead at Calvin Klein Underwear and the underwear group brands at PVH. I have been working in the fashion industry for about 18 years now. And I actually started in design and then transitioned into technical design. I love pattern making, so I'm definitely glad to be on this panel today. And it's been about 6 years since we started our pilot at CKU. So I've been working in 3D for 6 years now.
Excellent, thank you. Kerrie, how about you?
I'm Kerrie Engle. I'm the technical design manager at Lee Menswear. We're part of Contour Brands Incorporated. So we have Lee Jeans, Wrangler Jeans, Rock and Republic, and a number of other brands. I've been with the company for over 10 years, and we've been using 3D for over 10 years as well. So over 10 years of using browseware at this company, and it's completely transformed our processes. I'm excited to talk about it.
Well, we're glad you're here, all three of you, and we'll get started with some questions in just a minute. But before that, I wanted to just share a little bit of my own personal experience as to why this topic is very interesting to me. I'm sure many of you in the audience have similar stories and can relate to this, but I began my search for great fit back when I was about 5 or 6, sitting in the dark age. That was in the dark ages, sitting in my grandma's dining room at her sewing table. And I was so frustrated because the little t-shirt that I was making for my doll, literally 2 T's hand stitched together, did not fit my doll as expected. There were many more fails before there were successes. But by the time I was 16, I figured out how to sew properly and had begun making my own patterns and even made my own designer jeans from scratch. So flash forward to the 1990s, I had my small business. Computers are just kind of landing in people's homes. And I was looking for ways to make my custom sewing service more efficient. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could see the pattern stitched up on a form, make decisions, solve problems before we cut into that $40 a yard fabric. It was always my hope to be able to have a tool that could work like that. And here we are today with 3D technology navigating this brave new world. So I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. All right, well, let's get started with some questions. Enough about me. I want to hear from our panelists. They have some great things to share with us about their work. And hopefully at the end of this, we'll have some time for some questions from the audience. So we're going to start with the basics. And Kerrie, for those of you in the audience who may not know, could you describe to us what a technical designer is?
Yeah, so a technical designer is responsible for converting a design from concept into a physical sample and eventually, hopefully, into production. So this is done by creating technical package that include all the necessary information relating to the style, including the BOM, the bill of materials, the measurement specs, any construction call outs, pattern blocks or patterns in some cases. The tech packs are then sent to sample rooms or vendors for the garment to be sewn into a physical sample. And we're responsible for the execution of the fit and construction and pull on that. And we validate this by getting fit samples. We also will help review other types of samples along the calendar cycle that we follow. And we're working closely with the development of the style up until manufacturing. And in some cases, if quality issue happens, we might also get involved at that point as well. So we're really working cross-functionally with design, merchandising, quality, our vendors all over the world, and a lot of other points in business.
Wonderful, thank you for that. I'm going to move over to Afsha and kind of to follow up on that. What do you think, or what do you believe are the essential skills needed to succeed in technical design?
Well, a TD's role requires a diverse set of both technical and soft skills. Out of the technical skills, I would highlight maybe 4 of them. So the first one, a deep understanding of garment construction, of course, basically puzzling together the many pattern pieces of a style. The second and most important one would be the ability to identify and correct fit issues. This is a skill that you need to train your eye on more than anything else. The third, and in my opinion, the most overlooked one, which I, heard Roz and Bernard speak to it a little bit, but would be pattern making knowledge. In order to know how to correct the fit issues, you need to know how to work with patterns. So as a side note, when I train older tech designers at different companies who are a bit scared of transitioning into the 3D world, I tell them that once they get over the learning curve of the 3D software, they actually have an advantage over some of the younger tech designers, 3D tech designers who don't have as much exposure to pattern drafting in the industry. And lastly, the last technical skill would be the capacity to create and interpret comprehensive tech packs, which you use to communicate with your cross-functional teams and the factories about the fine details of the style. As far as soft skills go, I would say time management, since you're working with a company calendar and sometimes you're assigned over 100 styles a season. You need to achieve fit approval on time to make sure that the product hits the market on time. You also need to have excellent communication skills, since you are working with those cross-functional teams and the factories regarding the design. And the third soft skill you would need is creative problem solving, because not every fit issue has a textbook solution to it. You need to be able to get hands-on with the pattern. And sometimes the factory does not know how to correct the issue themselves, so you need to be there to guide them through it. And finally, adaptability. The companies change, design teams change, and the styles themselves change, so you need to be open to those changes and be able to work through them.
Thank you for that. That was very comprehensive. And I like what you said about the soft skill part. That creative problem solving is definitely a big part of the job. Meghan, I'm going to pivot over to you because I know you wanted to talk about this as well. What are your thoughts on the essential skills for technical design?
Yeah, I think Afsha and Kerrie, covered most of it. I guess like something that I would add is, when you're in that fit session, presentation skills are so necessary. Just being able to read the room. You might not know what other people, how they're feeling about that style, or what if your proto came in and, your corrections weren't exactly followed. So you're going to have to speak into that and just kind of develop that trust with your cross-functional team. And you're really managing the whole room. It's almost like a performance being up there. So I think that is definitely, something that is learned and essential.
Yeah, that takes a lot of skill and time, and some days are better than others when it comes to those presentation skills and the amount of preparation time you've had in order to execute that. I think that's a really great point. Kerrie, did you have any other thoughts about essential skills for technical designers?
I think we covered a lot of it. Maybe one I would add is kind of extending more on the cross-functional relationship. I think it's extremely important for technical designers to be great thought partners with their designers, being able to understand and interpret what their meanings might be. But some of that also goes into understanding the product line that you're working on, understanding the attitude and the vibe, that they're trying to communicate, making sure that you're translating that into the garment.
Excellent. Thank you so much, all three of you, on that. Well, now that we know what a technical designer is, hopefully for those in the audience who weren't familiar with that role or a little more familiar now, we want to talk about the 3D tools, how 3D support, how does 3D support technical design's ability to keep up with design intent, factory capabilities, and strategy changes. That's really one of the meatier topics, and how do we implement that into our businesses. So I know all three of you wanted to speak on this. Kerrie, since we ended with you, can we start with you on this one?
Yeah, so the 3D tools that we use, 3D development in general, we're using Browseware here at Contour Brands, but having a base fit block library is extremely important. Going into a season with an idea of what that foundation should be helps set the precedent and the vision for the rest of that development, and also helps any communication issues that might happen early on in the process. So by doing 3D product development from the beginning of our cycle, we've actually been able, on the Lean Menswear team, we don't do any AI sketching anymore. It's all done in 3D at this point. So we're doing all of these virtual prototypes from the very beginning. So I essentially treat those virtual prototypes as first fit rounds, but in digital. So by having accurate 3D fit rendering and then accurate construction within that 3D rendering, what we've seen as we've applied this process to various lines is typically a reduction of about 50% in our fit sample orders. And what we've also seen is a reduction in the amount of fit sample rounds that we have. So in my last count, as little as 5% of our styles needed to end up on a third round, which is a significant improvement from where it was in sort of our old process, which was sending in an AI sketch in a technical round, waiting a few weeks to get a garment back, making some changes, sending it back. And so you can quickly cut out many weeks in your process by having all that ideation up front.
Great, thank you. I know that when we talked about this last week, when we were practicing, my question for you was how is that transition of stepping away from the AI sketches when a lot of us old timers think about that AI sketches, kind of king, right? Sketches king.
Yeah.
So how was that transition for your team? Has that been going on for a long time, or is this new for your team?
Yeah, and like I said, we've been in browswear for over 10 years at Contour Brands. So, everybody coming in at this point understands that that's part of our MO. But the transitioning into it from people who come in from the outside and maybe haven't seen it before, it does take some time for them to understand that virtual language, understand, what the render is telling them. So I think it takes a designer that does understand the construction that they want, understands what the fit is, but also training the teams on what those fit bases are so that everyone is extremely comfortable with what the fit is. So from an AI perspective to a 3D perspective, some designers at the very beginning, they might want to hand sketch or they might draw an AI on top of an old 3D style to kind of get their point across. But what then happens in turn is that our 3D designers or technical designers translate that into that 3D prototype. And that is ultimately what ends up, if those styles go through, the rounds of funneling through our selection process, and they actually end up to a physical sample round, that's actually what the vendor is seeing. So every once in a while, there might be an AI, zoom in of like a construction that we might want to do. But a lot of that we're actually able to execute in 3D.
That's great. Thank you for that. I'm going to move over to Afsha to talk about that, how 3D is supporting tech design's ability to keep up with design intent, factory capabilities, and strategy changes from your perspective, because you've got a small business and you're doing more contract versus in-house work. How is this working for you?
Well, one of the key differences between what we do as a service company compared to what Meghan or Kerrie might do since they're working for brands is that we have to adapt to how each client wants to work. So it can be different from company to company. Some of our clients are using 3D for presentation purposes only, or for their buying meetings, and then some are fitting in the software. So we are using Browswear vStitcher, and we're working closely with our clients to identify any of those fit or construction issues early in the process. And then we're able to help them refine the style to make sure that the design intent is clear for both the buyers and the factories. So 3D is making that very easy to adjust the style as needed if any of those updates are needed to the design or the fit. So sometimes our clients we create the style for them in 3D, they notice a problem, and the next day they already have a new pattern for us, and they're like, can you swap this out for us, please? We need to look at this update that we made to the pattern. So 3D is a game changer in that sense, and it's great to be able to transition from this outdated processes that we were using and make it so much more efficient.
Oh, that's great to hear. I'm going to go back over to you, Meghan, because you and I were speaking the other day, and I enjoyed hearing you saying, new technology requires new ways of collaboration. And this kind of works into that theme of implementation of 3D. We were actually talking about AI at the time, but then as I was thinking about this yesterday, I was like, well, let's talk about that in terms of implementation. And I think you have an example of this, how new technology requires new ways of collaboration. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I would love to. First, I would love to kind of weigh in on the last question of how, 3D is like a great tool for tech. And just, I think of kind of the history of like the role of a technical designer, because it wasn't always a role, it was a pattern maker. And it's kind of evolved to those skills being shifted overseas. And I think Kerrie kind of touched on that a little bit. But companies were finding that you still need someone to communicate these fit comments so that, it gets represented in production. So what's interesting is now that we have 3D, it's almost like the tech designer is coming full circle, because you can get much more hands-on with your patterns. And, and we've been talking about it a lot, like how much pattern making is just so essential to technical design. So now you're giving more tools and resources to that person to fulfill their role. Our vendors, they do like fantastic work with their pattern making, but a technical designer, you have to know how to communicate those comments, because two comments could essentially cancel each other out. You have to kind of have that pattern knowledge. If you're making a correction, it always affects another area of the pattern. So to just have that foresight of what you're really asking for is essential. And so I think that's like a nice leeway into like the collaboration, because, I really think that there's technology that, can help roles, and not just like tech design, but, lots of your cross-functional team kind of, maybe having to bend and flex their roles a bit to meet your shared objective. So something that I've found like in my work, and I'm sure we've all had this challenge of time or limited resources, and, being asked to use 3D. But if I don't have all the components, so, sometimes, our materials are not digitized, and, that's essential to creating a 3D style. There's been instances where like, if I'm, short on time or resources, kind of leaning into some of my other partners, like my design team or even my vendors, and just like, I don't have this, can you take a look and see or provide something to me? Or even my vendors, just like being really open and seeing like, how can we all like pitch in to just like get this shared objective completed. And I think that, these collaboration tools and just having, we also work in browser vStitcher. So it's one file type, each partner can open up that same file type. So there's that interoperability.
Great, thank you. All right, well, I think we've kind of talked about the implementation part, and we can move on to some conversation around the organizational change that is either happening or needs to happen in the business as we integrate 3D further. So before we get kind of into that a little bit more, I wanted to hear from each one of you, like, what is your mission statement around technical design? And this can either be your company's mission statement or your own personal thoughts on, what your goals are when you go in there to make clothes every day. And if you can talk about this for the teams, just to give us an idea of kind of where your mindset is, then we can jump into more about how that affects our organizational changes. So let's start with Kerrie, if that's all right.
Yeah, so I'll start with the Contour Brands mission statement, which is we grow our iconic brands through innovation, design, and sustainable performance to excite more and more consumers. So Contour Brands is a relatively new company. In the last few years, we spun off from a larger company. So I think at the crux of it, what we see is that Contour Brands, we're taking innovation and design to heart. It's within our mission statement from the beginning. And I think it shines through in how we've implemented 3D into our development process. So beyond just the time savings that we all know 3D has allowed us, sustainability is also something at the heart of what we do. And that we're really passionate about. And 3D helps us reduce our physical sampling, which helps support our sustainability goals as well. And by reducing water consumption, less fabric waste, less transportation emissions, and all of the other things that go into creating a sample. So I'm really proud to be a part of tech design that supports that mission for the company.
That's great. Afsha, can you share your mission statement?
Sure, I would refer to our company's mission statement. So that is, as technical designers, we bridge creativity and reality, driving excellence in the fashion industry by delivering garments that epitomize flawless fit, comfort, and grace. And this mission statement reminds everyone from cross-functional teams to the entire company about the importance of the role of the technical designer in the overall design process. So while exceptional style and top quality materials are essential, it's the perfect fit that ensures customer confidence and loyalty, because fit can make or break the garment.
Great. That's right. Meghan, how about you?
Yeah, so when I think about this, I think that tech is really like the liaison between design side and the business side. And I think that this is why it's really so important for technical design to really be, involved from like the beginning of the creation stage or the ideation stage. I think, just, not to still give design like the space for them to be, creative and like, play around with their ideas, but for us to kind of see what might be coming down the pipeline and maybe have any foresight to, some challenges and just try to get ahead of things.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and your mission statement ties, when it's coming from the company, it's kind of encompassing all those cross-functional roles. And when you think about technical design's commitment to fit and construction, we're a specific portion of that, but it plays a big role in that cross-functional piece. So I'm curious about your thoughts on your mission statement and how does it inform your cross-functional teams about the work that you do. Does it have all the meat and potatoes it needs, or do we need to evolve it as we bring 3D into the picture? And I'll open it up. Thoughts, Meghan?
Yes, I'd love to take this one. So there are some challenges. I do feel like there is still, a lot of resistance to adopt 3D. Especially like in my area where we work on underwear, it's close to body. There's, that fear of how is the compression going to translate into 3D. So, I still think, you can still get so much information from it that it's still so useful to help make decisions up front. So what I really like to tell my team is we all need to be our own advocate. You need to be curious, and you need to express interest. And so when each one of us is out and you're with your design partners and you have that close relationship with them. So if you're seeing like a challenge and you think that 3D could be like a good way of helping solve or like help make some decisions up front, offer it up, and we could help put together maybe a smaller pilot to kind of try some things out. And I think, having the smaller pilots is really been like a big help in kind of, documenting like the process and then kind of sharing back with, the wider team.
Great, thank you for that. Kerrie, what about you when you think about like merchandisers and designers and you're bringing 3D to them? How do you keep that conversation going about advocacy for both technical design and 3D? What kind of projects do you take on, or what kind of discussions do you have with your team?
Yeah, it can be challenging, again, especially if somebody is coming in from the outside and doesn't have any exposure to 3D. It does take some time to train their eye on it. So some of the ways that we've done that on the Lee brand side is that we've done, extensive global views at our fits across the board. And we actually looked at those through looking at pressure mapping within our system. So we actually, in turn, trained all of our merchandisers and designers to understand pressure maps across all of the different fits that they have. And that is a very powerful tool to kind of strip away, the wash and the finishes and all that stuff that might distract them, but to get to the what you said earlier, the meat and potatoes of, what is this fit? Do we really have two fits here? Or should this really be one fit? So we've gotten to the point where most of our merchandisers and designers really trust the 3D to the extent where they want to see, every item in the line, aligned in 3D, aligned in pressure mapping, because that's what we essentially train them to be able to see. So that's been really powerful for us. I think one of the challenges maybe that we're having, and I hear about this across the industry, is sort of getting to that point where that end 3D asset could maybe be consumer facing. So there's definitely some examples of that we have within contour brands, where stuff might end up on tags and ticketing and that kind of thing, and the consumer hopefully doesn't realize that it's a 3D garment. But I think ultimately that's where I think the industry would like to go, is again that in turn goes back to reducing sampling. And if you think about photo shoot samples and reducing the amount that we're having to do for that, that's definitely something that's on the horizon.
That's great. That got me thinking, Kerrie, about something you said earlier in our discussion today. You used the words virtual language. Mm-hmm. And when you're talking about your internal team and your merchandisers understanding the virtual language, mm-hmm. That's a big deal. I mean, that's like, you got to have a workshop on that every week, I would think, just to, keep everybody up to speed on all the things that are changing. And it's also making me think about the other thing that you just said was, if we're going to be bringing this to our consumer, I wonder, and I'd love to hear any of your thoughts on how much virtual language are they going to need to have in order to understand this new way of presenting a product to them?
Yeah, I think that consumers, obviously we're not there quite yet. I'm not saying we won't ever be there, but I think consumers are starting to get more comfortable with AI or virtual type looks with virtual fit rooms and all of the various things out there. A lot of consumers, especially younger ones, are getting really into gaming and buying outfits in this virtual environment. So I think that that's going to translate over time with consumers. But yeah, going back to the virtual language piece of it, that's not just something you can learn one time. I feel very confident that that's something you need to do with every different product category that you work with. If you go to a new brand, that consumer might have a completely different wear preference. So you need to understand what the virtual language is, what those fits are for that product line that you're working in. And that needs to happen at the technical design level, and it needs to be understood all the way up through the merchants level, so that they can also communicate that to their salesmen and their accounts that they're speaking to.
Yeah, really important for us not to be siloed in our work, right? Because that knowledge sharing across the other roles is really important as we continue to evolve here. Afsha, did you have thoughts on when working with merchandisers, designers, how you advocate for 3D? If you have people that might be a little gun shy of it or worried about it, how do you communicate with them?
Well, I think showing them instead of telling them is the best way, right? So continuing to work in it and showing them how you can fit in the software and how you can design in it, and just showing them the time cut between doing it the old-fashioned way of like AI sketches or so it's going to be really beneficial for them to see how it's going to help the company, right? And especially on an upper management level, not just your designers and merchandisers. On an upper management level, they need to understand how 3D is going to help them achieve their overall goals with meeting even their calendar deadlines, right? So
yeah, that's great. Well, that makes me think, that makes me think about cultivating leadership support as well. And, Afsha, you are the leader, so, you get to cultivate your own support there, I'm sure. But for the other two of you who are working more in-house, when there are a lot of unknowns around 3D, what steps do you take, or how do you continue to cultivate that leadership support to make sure you're getting what you need for your teams to continue using 3D as vigorously as you can. Meghan, you want to take that one?
Sure. So I guess, first of all, I think it's important to know that, there's not everyone, needs to be a 3D user to be an expert. There's different types of experts like in digitization. And with that, I think, to Afsha's point, showing is better than telling. So, showing your leaders like what is possible, what could be done, and even going back to maybe these small little pilots you did with like your design team, kind of like educating your leaders on, what is possible, and, being mindful of what your company's initiatives are. I think, Kerrie had mentioned sustainability. I think we are all concerned, we're all interested in sustainability, and 3D could definitely be a tool for that. So definitely, kind of sharing and, educating your leaders on what is possible. And then just, being goal oriented and putting together, a project plan with some clear objectives and how you can get there.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in on that one? No, you're looking good. Okay, I have an example. I'll just share it real quickly. But one of the ways that we were, kind of noodling around with the 3D thing and trying to build our own toolbox of virtual language, if you will. And we did a little exercise. I had the help of one of the technical designers on the women's team, using the avatars across a size range. They come, of course, we've got our numeric size range, but then we also had our alpha size range. And there was some confusion around how that alpha size fit is different from the numeric size. Again, for technical designers, that feels, very basic information, but it's not to everybody, and they need to understand. So using 3D, just the visual of a size range, and then being able to drop in lines to show them this is where your alpha divides these avatars, and you can see why one customer who's on the smaller side of that alpha might feel like the size is a little too big, and the person on the upper size of that alpha might feel like it's a little too small. It was a very useful tool, and it gave leadership a chance to see it's not just about making the clothes. It's not just about putting patterns together. It's about exploring, the work that we do in a very comprehensive way. So I think helping leadership understand and cultivating that relationship for them, helping them understand, is going to be very powerful as we try to continue to expand the 3D footprint in the industry. All right, time is cruising. This is awesome, and you guys are also wonderful, and I just love hearing what you have to say. We're going to move on to institutional knowledge. So the question here that we're kind of bouncing off of, and again wanting to tie it back to, why is technical design at the heart of 3D? So what resources do you have for training teams, internal and external, in your business? And do you have what you need? Because 3D is a big thing to train, and not everyone coming to you is going to have that knowledge. So Meghan, do you have any insights? I know you and I talked a little bit about some experiences you had on LinkedIn or just outreach, but maybe tell us a little bit about your resources, your training, and how you stay connected.
Yeah, so absolutely. I guess, internally, back, during our COVID days where we were starting to aggressively build like our block library, we had, team meetings to kind of review the styles and submissions. And I think what it kind of evolved into, just what it naturally evolved into, was almost kind of being like a show and tell. And we kind of learned like each other's strengths and weaknesses and kind of learned from each other. And it was just so like amazing to be a part of and see, and from there we kind of built off that, and, just kind of understanding, some people's strengths, like, okay, like, why don't you take this topic and, really do like a deeper dive? and let's come back and do kind of like this internal workshop. So it was, peer-to-peer support. And it was just really cool to be a part of and kind of watch that. I know I definitely learned a lot. And I guess, kind of like documenting it. And so now we have these internal like resources that we built, ourselves. So I think that was, really great. And Afsha, you were, a huge part of that too. And then I just, I wanted to mention our vendors. I've had like some really wonderful sessions with our vendors and kind of showing them like, okay, we found this process. This is working for us, especially around like our bra challenge. It's definitely a more complicated style to build. So kind of sharing that process out, and I feel like it built up so much like morale around 3D that I found like my vendors were coming back to me with, requests like, can you give us like some more challenges? Or like, there was just such like an eagerness to learn more, and, learning from them as well. Like, so being very like open, transparent about like some challenges, like, oh, I'm having difficulty with these narrow elastics. They keep like, like colliding with each other. Like, can you take a look at this and come back to me with some solutions? So really kind of reaching out to, your whole team, and just, and really being open to just being a bit vulnerable. You'll get a lot back from that. And then I guess, quickly, some external resources. I have found personally that the 3D community in our industry is very open and willing to talk and to connect. So I just, I encourage people to reach out, and because you never know who might want to talk with you.
That's great. Thank you. I echo that, encouraging technical designers, 3D experts to collaborate more, reach out to each other, and share this knowledge. It's only going to make everybody stronger in the field. So it's really great. Kerrie, you want to talk about some of the resources you have for training and outreach?
Yeah, so the number one thing is we have an in-house trainer. She's also a technical designer that has responsibility for a product line as well. But we've established sort of recorded training sessions that are just contour specific, that we use to train new hires. Both designing and technical designers get trained in this as well. And then that also ties into how to use our fit block libraries, stitch libraries, trim and hardware libraries. And then from a communication perspective, outside the company, something that we've established are virtual quality standards. The same ones that we use in-house, we've created virtual quality standards that we would share with vendors that we might partner with. And that includes things like camera positions, lighting settings of those camera positions, texture requirements, DPI, all of the things associated with that, the right avatars to use, avatar positions, all of those things are kind of set up in a package that's tight, and we can work with a vendor so that we run into a lot less questions when we're working with a vendor. And I think there's definitely what we found, again, having been in 3D for so long, is that it's taken a while for us to, find vendors that are maybe as up to speed as we are with 3D. So it's definitely been a learning back and forth between different vendors that we work with.
Oh, that's so interesting. And when I think about all those libraries for all of those digital assets that contribute to your work, it's kind of mind-boggling. Like, where does all that stuff live, and how do you keep it organized so people can find what they need when they need it? That's a whole other subject that I'm sure we could spend an hour on. Afsha, what about in your business? How is the training? What resources do you use to make sure that everyone has what they need to do the work?
Well, Browseware just has their Browseware University, which you can self train yourself through the video models that they have. And then they have their help center, which has great resources as well. So besides what they have already set up in the Browseware University, they have additional videos on their help center, or additional, links to some information, and also their YouTube channel. In addition to what Browseware offers, We also have our own YouTube channel. So if I feel like I am seeing a struggle in a specific area in 3D, I try to create some videos for users out there to understand how to, like, for example, construct a bow, or if they're doing lingerie, how to add rings and adjusters to the bra straps. So various videos like that. And I'm lucky that for now, that since we're a small company, I am able to work closely with the designers that work with me. So, I can give them that hands-on support when they need as well.
That's great. I want to pivot over to, working with educational institutions. I also want to talk about what the talent pipeline is looking like these days. So Kerrie, I'm going to open this up for you, because you and I spoke the other day about some of the outreach that you do and how you work outside the company to stay in touch with the talent pipeline coming your way. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think it's super, super important as professionals that we continue to stay really connected to universities. So we'll touch base with different universities to, do speaking sessions with their students, usually on a video conference. And so I think it's important for us to let the universities know what we're looking for in our future talent pipeline. So 3D is not going away. It's part of what we do now. It's going to continue to be part of what we do. So it's really important that students and educational leaders are understanding of what their students need to have. All of the things that we've already talked about, the pattern making background, having any exposure to 3D, no matter which 3D program. Something I tell students is, as long as you understand one of them and you get that exposure, put that in your portfolio, because all of those are extremely transferable between each other. Just understanding the concepts of what an X, Y, and Z axis is, is going to take you really, really far in terms of being able to get ahead in any kind of training on a new software. So my director and a lot of my colleagues are very involved with universities and want to connect with students. I think it's also, really important that we are there to show them, here's what a technical designer role is today. Because I think a lot of students, they might go into, I started out seeing a new show that showed up called Project Runway. I know it's many, many seasons old now at this point, but I was like, I want to be a fashion designer. And then I go into school and I'm like, actually, I just love putting the puzzle together. And that's how I ended up as a pattern maker and technical designer. So I think it's important that we really stay connected to the students and the universities.
That's great. Afsha, I know you've talked about, the talent pool, the pipeline, and what's your experience been with, how prepared the students are coming out of school?
Well, from my own personal experience and from working with some fresh out of school talent, I feel like graduates are not fully prepared for our current industry. Aside from pattern drafting, I think it's really important to add technical design as a course in the curriculum, or even tie it in with 3D technical design, as a 2-in-1. This industry, it has a lot of technical designers and has a lot of 3D designers, but it's very hard to find a 3D technical designer with tech design skills, which is what companies currently need. And, that's what I'm always on the lookout for. So 3D softwares can be learned in a matter of weeks, but tech design skills can take years to master. So why not give that advantage to students, right? Teach them from the beginning. I think what Kerrie what she had just touched on about working with universities, that's amazing. And I hope that other universities can get a jump start on that as well, because we're sort of depriving students, of the opportunities when they enter the industry. They feel like they have none.
Yes, and I think something you said earlier, Afsha, about the creative problem solving. You might learn technical design, but I can tell you on a daily basis, I apply my creative problem solving for all kinds of things. It's a very transferable skill. So once you learn that, it's a good thing to have in your back pocket. Meghan, we're getting close on our time, but I wanted to just make sure, did you have anything you wanted to add to institutional knowledge and the talent pipeline?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an interest at schools with 3D. I think, that curriculum is in all the universities. And yeah, I think, Afsha and Kerrie both made some excellent points. I don't think I have too much to add there.
Okay, great. Well, terrific. I'm going to move on then to 3D empowerment for technical design. And when we think about that, technical design, not to, well, I don't want to go down a weird path here, but sometimes we feel a little underappreciated, right? Or we're kind of the silent warriors getting the work done behind that big magic curtain, right? And we hang out backstage, work the magic, do the stuff, and then ta-da, this beautiful thing comes forward, and it doesn't always come back to yay technical designer, and we wish that it would, right? 3D feels like a way to empower technical design, and I do feel like this is the time for that curtain to come back, move that curtain out of the way, and technical designers to step forward into this new world. So I'd love to hear from each of you quickly if we can. I do have one wrap-up question I want to get to, but it's kind of around 3D empowerment. You see my prompt questions that we've discussed. So it's like, what do you control? What don't you control? Why is it important to define this for your team? And Afsha, I know you wanted to weigh in on that question.
For sure. So quality is something that I control. Before starting our service business, I worked as a freelancer. So all of the current clients of 3DFS were clients that I had, they've been migrated over. So it's important to me that my team is still offering the same like high quality 3D garments and services that they got when they directly worked with me. Controlling consistency in the 3D files is really important. So we can't all be creating the same garment out of different materials or techniques. So I make sure that the process and the base materials are established by us early on when we're taking on a new client. We have to work with reliable and consistent fit avatars, so such as the one offered by Alvanon. And finally, we pride ourselves in working with a team that has a tech design background. So any patterns we create or any adjustments we make to patterns are fully vetted through Barra tech designers, some of which have over 30 years of experience in the industry. Some things that I can't control, obviously, is the design, right? Because we can offer our best advice when it comes to constructing the garment in 3D, but any changes to the design in real life, those are cost-affecting decisions that are up to the client and not up to us.
Yeah, very good. Well, and then the other question that kind of goes with, 3D empowerment for tech design is, we are supposed to be controlling the fit. Can we not, right? It's not who owns the fit. So I have my thoughts on that, but I'm going to keep them to myself. Kerrie, what are your thoughts on who owns the fit and how do we continue to empower technical design through 3D when it comes to fit?
It's definitely a complicated question.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a partnership, really, of who owns the fit. I mean, design ultimately owns the vision of what they want to create, and merchandising has to buy into that as well because they're also serving that to their accounts. But ultimately, the technical designer is responsible for executing on that fit. So having a great concept is great, but if you can't back it up with something that's going to match that concept, then we haven't accomplish what we need to accomplish. So I feel like it's definitely a partnership, but tech design is definitely responsible for executing on it.
Great. Meghan, do you think 3D empowers technical design?
I do. Something that I think is really inspiring that Kerrie was saying, that her team is, using 3D and replacing or phasing out their Illustrator sketches. Just because when I think of the future, like your 3D style is almost essentially like your tech pack, right? And so if 3D can be implemented earlier on and get digital first, you can start to make some decisions more upfront. And then you're also involving tech design upfront. Again, like we can help, have the foresight to any challenges that might be along the way. So I think that this is an empowering tool for tech, but I think that, all cross-functional partners are benefiting from it.
Yeah, it goes back to that lost my train of thought. It goes back to sort of the institutional knowledge. It goes also back to the organizational change when we think about the work being done sooner in the process than later. And so I think that empowerment, if it can come sooner in the process, is more likely going to benefit us and speed up the process too. So thank you for that. All right, we have 4 minutes left. So, wow, this went way faster than I thought it was going to. But I've just enjoyed this so much. But I have one last question for you. We're not going to have time for audience today. I'm sorry about that, but I am seeing some really, really nice comments in the chat. And I appreciate the audience very much for your thoughts and sharing. But since we're just about out of time, 30 seconds, I'm going to start with you, Afsha. Like, what's the main message that you would like the audience to take away from this discussion today?
I think this conversation has summed up the main points of why technical designers are essential when setting up a strong foundation in 3D for your company. Without technical designers continuously being involved in the process, 3D is not going to progress because the goal should not be just to design in the softwares, it should be to fit in them. So the technology is going to continue to improve, and the only way to not fall behind is to be working with it today.
That's great. Meghan, what are your final thoughts for the team?
Yeah, I guess, take us technical designers along in your journey of your development. We're really your collaboration partners here, and I think there's a lot of value to add to help see those designs come to fruition.
That's great. And Kerrie?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, 3D is just another tool in our arsenal to execute what we want to make. It's happening now. It's also the future. And just talking to these students watching, please make sure that you get into 3D. Show that in your portfolios. And of course, I want to add a plug. There are summer internships at a lot of different companies, including Contour brands, that will involve 3D. So good luck to everyone.
Yes, and if your company doesn't have those internships for TD, maybe it's time we get a little noisy about that. There's a lot of things we can get noisy about. Certainly the work that we do and do well, but I think getting that connection between the up and coming talent with the people that are working in your business today is really important. That just gives us a good legacy, right, as we continue to build our businesses and work through our careers. All right, it's 8:58. That kind of wrapped it up. I didn't have any other questions, and y'all did such an amazing job today. I appreciate you, Afsha, Kerrie, and Meghan, for your participation. It's been really nice getting to know you over the past couple of days as we put this together. I've enjoyed that very much. And to the audience, thank you so much for being here, whether you're here live or you're going to look at this later. These are important conversations to have, and I hope that you've learned something or can take some of this back to your teams, or maybe you just know a little bit more about how 3D works with technical design. And Josh, I see you over there. I'm guessing you're going to take the wheel.
Yeah, I'm back, and thank you for that so much. So many comments came through on how valuable of a discussion this was. From everyone. I think it really resonated with a lot of TDs out there, and also I think resonated a lot just with people who are interested in 3D. So thank you all for your insights and this deep exploration. I think it was very much needed.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
All right.